What's up, you nerds? So you're looking to start learning programming. One of the first things you started looking at was what programming language you should learn first. But holy shit, there's a ton of languages and scripts. You got C, C++, C Sharp, lot of Cs. You got Java, JavaScript not the same, CSS, HTML, PHP, Python. I mean, the list goes on and on. So before you even get started, it's important to know what all these languages do and which is going to be the best to start with. Don't worry, I'm going to break this down visually, so even if you're a dummy like me, you can get it. The first thing you gotta know is that most of these programming languages can be broken down into types of programming. What I mean by this is that they're used for different things. I'm going to break down the types of programmers there are and what languages they use, which should give you a good idea of what to start with if you're aiming to be like them. First up, we got web developers. Probably the most common in today's world. These magical beasts create the websites you and I use. Shit, they're part of the ones who built this platform you're watching this video on. But not all web developers are the same. Let's break it down into three main categories. Warning, this may be oversimplified, but you get the idea. 1. Designers and front-end developers. 2. Back-end developers. And 3. Full-stack developers. Designers and front-end developers are the ones that make websites pretty and functional for an end user. This is the type of developer that painstakingly goes through and makes sure websites actually work on a lot of browsers. Spoiler alert, this is a giant pain in the ass. They also make websites look very nice and appealing. The main languages they focus on are HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. HTML and CSS are both more like scripts that outline what a website looks like. JavaScript is an actual programming language that makes the website actually do something useful. Next up is back-end developers. They are the ones who work on the unseen side of websites. They make sure websites can store data, retrieve data, and talk to other websites. If designers and front-end developers are the fashionable and hip, the back-end developers are the more nerdy ones. The main languages they focus on are back-end languages like C#, Java, and JavaScript, and database scripts like SQL, MySQL, and NoSQL. Lastly is full-stack developers. They are the jack of all trades when it comes to web development. They're supposed to be able to work on both the front-end and back-end of a website, but normally it's not that simple. Wherever you find a front-end developer creating a beautiful website from scratch all purely through their own hard work, you'll find the full-stack developer out there downloading said template and using it as their own work. But really, full-stack developers do a little of both front-end and back-end, and they typically lean towards specializing in one or the other. They are rarely as good in either as their more focused counterparts. That being said, they're very highly valued in the industry for their versatility in development. The main languages they focus on are HTML, CSS, and JavaScript for the front end, and C#, Java, and JavaScript for the back end. To summarize, if you're looking to make a website, you have basically three choices. Learn front end, aka CSS, HTML, and JavaScript, or learn back end, aka C#, Java, or JavaScript. JavaScript is probably the best language to pick as of now. Or finally, full stack, where you learn a little bit about all of them and call yourself an expert. On to the next type of developer, the artists of the development world, the game designers. Little known fact, almost every software developer started off wanting to be a game developer, until they learned how much money the other types of developers make. I don't know as much about this category, so I'm going to break it down into two categories. First up, we have the Unity hipster indie game developers. Do you want to create games in a small team, maybe solo? Pick yourself up by the bootstraps and develop not only the game, but the art assets, the sound, music, and everything else that goes into a game? Well, the programming language you should learn is C#, which is primarily used for Unity, a popular game engine. Next up is the, quote, real game developer, end quote. If you want to work for a massive game company and have your soul be drained on a daily basis, this is the work for you. Work for infamous names such as Blizzard or Riot. Or I guess you could go work for actual companies like DreamShot Studios or something, but yeah, these hardcore game developers take shit seriously. That means learning a real language, something that gives you speed and flexibility while also being a major pain in the butt to learn. That's right, you'll want to learn C++. Good luck. The next type of developer we're talking about is low-level programmers, or embedded programming. When I think of this type of developer, I often think of people coding missile guidance systems or something, but while they do that, they also work on cool stuff like drivers for hardware and such. We'll break these developers into two categories, although there's probably quite a few variations. First up is the operating systems engineer. These guys literally built the software that makes your computer run. Windows, Linux, and macOS were all developed by these guys. The true definition of a nerd, basically the embodiment of way too much time spent in the basement. Probably one of the more difficult but high-paying software developer jobs. For this type of engineering, you're going to want to learn a low-level programming language like C and C++. No, they're not the same, but yes, they're similar. C#, on the other hand, is the red-headed stepchild that's very different. Second up is the sorta hardware, sorta software engineer. If you want to work on driver software used in conjunction with popular tech like CPUs, GPUs, and motherboards, this is for you. I have no idea how these guys keep their sanity, but if it works for them, it'll probably maybe work for you. For this, you'll probably want to learn C and C++, and maybe a little assembly. There are plenty of other types of embedded engineers developers, not explained here, but in general you want to learn lower-level programming languages like C and C++. Then there's desktop software developers. These guys make the applications that actually run on your computer, not in the browser. I'm not really sure what categories there are here, so I'm just going to lump them all in the same group. If you want to create and manage both new and very, very old software, desktop development is definitely the way to go. For this, you'll want to learn a language like Java or C#. That being said, this is slowly being taken over by the web developers, as now you can write desktop applications using the languages mentioned earlier. Last but not least is the mobile app developers. These guys create phone apps and games. This is a tricky field because every phone developer hates each other, so they use different languages. Just like in desktop development, a lot of app development is being stolen by the greedy web developers since you can now use those languages to build apps. But if you're a more hardcore fan of mobile development, you'll probably want to learn languages like Swift for Apple devices and Java for Android devices. Those are the main types of developers, at least the ones that I can think of. At the very least, they're the important ones. We could mention the scripters who like to dabble in LUA or PowerShell, but let's be real, they're not really programmers. They're called script kiddies for a reason. Hopefully that was enough to point you in the right direction to learn the programming language that best fits what you want to do. But if not, here's a quick summary. For web developers, learn HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. For game developers, learn C++ or C#. For embedded developers, learn C or C++ and maybe assembly. For desktop developers, learn Java or C#. For mobile app developers, learn Swift or Java. Or just become a web developer. There are many more programming languages, some super old that barely anyone uses anymore, and some that are for very specific use cases. Either way, they're most likely not in the scope for a newbie looking to start programming. That's all. You're set. If the video helped you, maybe considering subscribing, or even liking the video. Anyway, see ya.